Tonight, the federal tax break on the cost of some basic goods put into practice.
It honestly doesn't make much of a difference.
Yes, I was surprised at how cheap they were.
The GST relief generating mixed reaction and messaging.
This was a last-minute tax change with massive implementation costs for small businesses.
What's included and what isn't.
Even though inflation has stabilized, people are just being more cautious about their money.
How a plunging Canadian dollar could put U.S. travel plans up in the air.
One wonders, do I really have to go?
With Canada Post talks grounded, the waiting game on whether postal workers will be forced back on the job.
Our sales are down 20 to 25%.
And in the driver's seat of your own destiny.
Lots of shiny bits. I like the bling.
The creative cars unlocking a connection with others.
CTV National News with Heather Butts. Reporting tonight, Marcia McMillan.
Good evening. Millions of Canadians paid a little less while out shopping today. The federal government's tax holiday came into effect on a long list of items from kids' toys to takeout to Christmas trees, all tax-free for the next 2 months. The break getting mixed reviews from shoppers and retailers. CTV's Jeremy Sharon reports.
Thank you. All right, thanks.
Checking off items on the Christmas list.
It'd be clean.
Yeah. Shoppers at this Ottawa kids store saving the tax today.
Were you aware today's the first day of this tax holiday the government?
Actually, no, I had no idea. It's nice that there's a break on that, but could also be on more useful things as well.
I had no impact. I would have bought what I bought today regardless, and it honestly doesn't make much of a difference.
Ottawa's 2-month so-called tax holiday being met with mixed reviews and confusing messages for some businesses.
At the beginning, we thought kind of because we're a kids store that everything would be exempt, but there's actually quite a few rules around what is and what isn't applicable.
And this retail store owner doesn't expect any boost in business.
It's just this busy time of year, and it's just one more thing to think about.
While the government calls the measure an incentive to shop local and support your favorite business.
The government has absolutely butchered the communications around this. This was a last-minute tax change with massive implementation costs for small businesses.
But Canada's small business minister says there will be leniency when it comes to compliance.
As long as small businesses do their best to comply with the legislation and demonstrate their ability to be able to do that, then the Canada Revenue Agency will not focus on them.
It's a measure aimed at saving taxpayers some money, but the expected impact on businesses varies based on the establishment. At this brewery, all signs point to a bump in brew sales.
If we look back years back, we would have seen more action in the first couple of weeks of December, so we're kind of anticipating that people are just sitting back and waiting a little bit before purchasing like their beer gifts.
A welcome measure, too, for patrons enjoying a pint today.
I had no idea it was starting today.
Maybe have a second. It was weird to see a bill with no tax on it, but it was a nice surprise.
I think the timing's nice because the holidays, everybody goes out more anyways.
Jeremy Sherrill, CTV News, Ottawa.
The debate among Canadian leaders over how Ottawa should reply to Donald Trump's looming tariff threat is getting political. Some premiers now warning the Trudeau government against using retaliatory measures. CTV's Colton Prale has the latest.
As Ottawa considers its response to Trump's tariff threats, Western premiers want assurances export tariffs won't be an option.
That would be a betrayal of those that work in the industry. That would be a betrayal of the Team Canada effort, and it would be a betrayal of Canadians as well.
Speaking to CTV's question period, Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe calling on the Prime Minister to publicly rule out export taxes on products like uranium, potash, and oil, crucial resources for U.S. farmers in the energy sector, and equally important to provincial coffers in Saskatchewan and Alberta. In an open letter to the Prime Minister, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith warned implementing an export tax on oil and gas could cause a national unity crisis, particularly if the funds raised are used to protect the economies of other provinces.
Economists kind of throw their hands up and say, what are you doing? We're going to teach them a lesson by harming ourselves. because they're harming themselves.
The federal government would not say whether it's considering export tariffs, nor did it respond to Premier Moe's request, instead pointing to earlier comments that the response to the U.S. tariff threat would be robust. Meanwhile, the former finance minister says Canada needs to be very careful in its strategy.
I think we need to work with them collaboratively, think about the places that we can make changes in our own interests, and not react quickly in ways that will inflame tensions.
While reaction to using energy exports as a negotiating tool has been mixed across Canadian provinces, the push for increased border security has been unanimous. Danielle Smith has said the details of Ottawa's plan for that could be available as early as Monday. Marcia.
Colton, thank you. With the holidays approaching and dreams of warm winter vacations not too far off, Canadians are getting strategic when it comes to travel. The loonie is at a 4-year low, making that trip south of the border a lot more expensive. Here's CTV's Paul Hollingsworth.
Record inflation has already caused a dip in the travel industry. Now, a faltering Canadian dollar has made a troubling situation much worse. During what should be a busy Christmas season, there are signs of a travel slowdown.
Even though inflation has stabilized, people are just being more cautious about their money.
This traveler flies south once a year. The struggling loonie has her rethinking plans.
For going to the U.S., which is our quick, easy escape, no. It's not good.
She's not alone.
One wonders, do I really have to go?
There are solutions, tricks to navigate through a costly situation, like grabbing bargain tickets on Black Friday.
My friends found a flight for about $300 Canadian to get to Guatemala and back, round trip.
Travel expert Barry Choi says Canadians have proven to be savvy when it comes to saving money.
Maybe they're going to start staying at home, or maybe they're going to be, taking those budget hotels, maybe not going to that A destination.
There is a positive flip side to this. During the Christmas holiday season, many Americans travel to Canada, often entering through our airports, spending money in our country and taking advantage of the Canadian dollar. This airport recently expanded its number of direct flights to U.S. destinations.
We have quite a bit more capacity than we had last year. That's thanks to a number of services that have returned.
Those travel routes go both ways and are not just meant for Canadians.
It's actually the other way around. They want to bring people to Canada.
A possible uptick for tourism at a time when the Canadian dollar continues to plummet and airlines brace for a downturn in holiday travel. Paul Hollingsworth, CTV News, Halifax.
Emergency crews are assessing the damage after a landslide shut down the Sea to Sky Highway near Lions Bay, British Columbia. Police say the highway, 31 kilometers north of Vancouver, is expected to reopen at midnight local time. There are no detours available. Local RCMP say no injuries have been reported so far. The landslide comes as storms along BC's south coast left thousands without power and forced the cancellation of ferry services. Postal workers could be back on the job as early as next week. After more than 4 weeks without mail delivery and no resolution in sight, the federal government says time's up. And now there are questions about why the government waited this long and why the two sides weren't able to reach an agreement on their own. CTV's Rahim Ladani reports.
Across the country, small businesses are being squeezed out during a crucial time of year for sales.
Our sales are down 20 to 25% that we would normally see in the Christmas season.
It's been 1 month since the Canada Post strike began, halting package and mail deliveries. With both sides still unable to reach a deal, the federal government is calling a timeout, which could force staff back to work as early as next week.
Anything that's going to impact Canadians at large, you're going to ultimately see the government have a short leash in terms of how much time they're going to give for either party to lock out or to strike.
For the third time this year, Ottawa is stepping in. The Labour Minister has asked a federal board to assess the likelihood the two sides can reach a deal by the end of 2024. If the board believes it to be unlikely, it will order workers back on the job, extending the terms of the existing agreements to mid-May of the new year.
They know they can't win, so they're going to try everything they can do.
The union has denounced the move, calling it an assault on its bargaining rights. Canada Post said it looks forward to welcoming its employees back to work. As for public sentiment,
I think it's a good idea that they go back to work, yes, next week. So I really feel for the seniors or those that don't have the technology support to get things in another way.
I'm happy about it for two reasons. One is the charity perspective, because they're really suffering. Their donations are down a lot.
the union says it has downgraded its wage hike demand from 24% to 19% over 4 years. But Canada Post says the ask is too expensive after 6 years of financial losses.
So when you hear workers looking for 19% wages, more sick days, a lot of private sector workers are not getting those same perks. So you're not seeing the same level of sympathy.
The two parties still have the chance to come to their own agreement, but that will need to happen soon, before the federal board weighs in. Raheem Ladani, CTV News, Toronto.
Calgary-based energy giant Enbridge has cleaned up about 60% of an almost 265-liter oil spill in Wisconsin. The spill was discovered during an inspection of the company's Line 6 pipeline west of Milwaukee last month. Enbridge says the spill was caused by a faulty connection on a pump transfer pipe, which has since been fixed. Now to a sobering statistic. According to new data, roughly 1 in 20 deaths in Canada last year was through medically assisted dying. It's a record-breaking number, but some believe a number of those deaths should never have happened. CTV's Kamal Karmali explains.
It was quite a rapid decline.
The pain still fresh for Willie Grant years later. ALS stripped everything from her husband.
You're grieving at the loss of, being able to speak properly, or the loss of, using your arms.
It was then they chose medically assisted dying as a way out.
Glenn just turned to me and said, it's time to go.
Last year, more than 15,000 people in Canada received medical assistance in death or MAID. That's nearly 5% or 1 in 20 of all deaths last year. Although 2023 saw the highest number of Canadians receiving help to die, the yearly growth rate has slowed, down to a 15% jump last year. More than 95% of those who received MAID last year were deemed to have natural death as foreseeable, which means the patient was already on an immediate path towards death. But 4% did not, meaning even though living a long life was likely, their medical condition was too much to bear. And that's drawing concern, because the data shows those who could choose to live were suffering from other mental struggles motivating them to die.
Nearly half of the people in those situations cite feeling a burden, and nearly half cite suffering from loneliness.
Calling for more restrictions on who can apply for medically assisted dying.
It is discriminatory to offer death to people with disabilities who are not otherwise dying.
But others are against more hurdles.
We don't want to put in any more barriers or make the process any harder than it has to be.
And in just over 2 years from now, the law is also set to expand to allow people diagnosed solely with a mental illness and no other issues to apply for medically assisted dying. Marcia.
Kamal, thank you. There's increasing pressure for federal agencies in the U.S. to provide answers about dozens of unexplained drone sightings in New York.
People of this city and state and region deserve answers of what the heck is going on.
For weeks, there's been dozens of drone sightings reported over residential areas, as well as restricted sites and critical infrastructure. Sightings have been reported in Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. In a briefing today, FBI and Department of Homeland Security officials said many of the sightings appear to be manned aircraft mistakenly identified as drones. They said there's no evidence the drones pose a national security or public safety threat. The suspect accused of killing a high-profile CEO in Manhattan now has a new high-powered New York attorney. Karen Friedman Agnifilo is defending Luigi Mangione against murder charges. And we're learning what his life is like inside a Pennsylvania prison. He eats 3 meals per day, locked up in a 15 by 6 foot prison cell away from other inmates. Authorities say they spoke to Mangione's mother the night before he was arrested, showing photos of the suspect. His mother acknowledging it could be her son. Coming up, trying to turn up the heat on a cold case.
It's just not the same. It's never going to be the same.
How a family is sharing its anguish in the hopes of finding justice.
Monday, W5 investigates.
That must have been a shock. It was a shock.
A rental scam that bilks multiple tenants at once.
What's going on here?
How a major company was used by a convicted con artist.
This was not the first time that this has happened. It's happened for years.
W5 investigates Monday on CTV National News and ctvnews.ca.
A jury is deliberating the fate of a suspect in Longueuil, Quebec, accused of murdering her wife and the couple's 2 children. The 38-year-old suspect is Mohamed Balouz, a man at the time of the triple murder in 2022, who now identifies as a woman. She's accused of stabbing her wife 23 times, then suffocating their 2 small sons before trying to burn the evidence and attempting suicide. Balouz, who made the choice to defend herself, alleges her wife killed the children while she was out buying beer. The jury will be sequestered until a verdict is reached. An Alberta family is pleading for help tonight, hoping someone out there can crack the cold case surrounding the murder of a mother of 2. CTV's Tyler Barrow has their emotional story.
It's been extremely hard. She was really like the glue to our family, so it's like ever since then, it really has been broken for us.
It has been a long 3 years for Norma Jean Muirhead's family. In December of 2021, the 35-year-old was found dead in her car in southeast Calgary.
Words can't even explain what it's like. It's just not the same. It's never going to be the same.
At the time, police said officers were called to the 500 block of Cranston Drive Southeast just before 3 p.m. on December 2nd, 2021 for reports of a medical event. Officers found Muirhead in a parked vehicle, unconscious and unresponsive. She was pronounced dead at the scene. It's believed she was killed in the early hours of December 1st.
I've watched my family sob. I distinctively remember the screams from that night, and I have nightmares about it.
Norma Jean Muirhead left behind 2 children, now 17-year-old Parker and 19-year-old Riley Boggs, who called her mom her best friend and someone she could go to for anything.
It's been really hard to navigate in my life, and just trying to get through each day.
The family says they are satisfied with the work being done by police to solve her cold case.
It's hard knowing that there's people out there that know, or the person who did it's just walking around free. It's really hard for us. I really need the closure of the person who did this is being held responsible.
I would like to face that person, whoever did this, to look me in the eyes and see what they've done to her whole family.
If you have any information about Muirhead's death, call police or Crime Stoppers. Tyler Barrow, CTV News, Calgary.
Still ahead, a revolution in cancer care. How these little backpacks are making a big medical impact. Kids and parents know backpacks are both cute and functional. And thanks to a Toronto team at the Hospital for Sick Children, these types of bags are offering new hope for children with a certain type of leukemia and could someday be useful in treating other illnesses as well. CTV's Pauline Chan reports.
Receiving chemotherapy is hard for anyone, but for children with B-cell acute lymphoblastic leukemia, there is new hope.
We've gone from what was a universally fatal disease to one in which in a country like Canada, 85 to 90% of children could have expected cure. And that was with a prolonged course, 2.5 to 3.5 years of traditional standard chemotherapy with all of the acute and long-term toxicities that involves.
Researchers looked at treating this most common form of childhood cancer using immunotherapy in addition to chemo.
The study was actually closed quite earlier than expected because the results were so good. So, for example, children at what we call an average risk of relapse, when they were treated with the chemotherapy alone, at a 3-year disease-free survival of 90%, whereas when they got the chemotherapy and the blinatumomab, actually that raised to 97.5%.
Blinatumomab teaches the body's own immune system to seek and destroy cancer cells, but there's a catch.
It's not an easy drug to give either. It's 2 months of a continuous infusion, so children are sort of hooked up to these little backpacks that are giving them the drug the entire time.
And so the Sick Kids team designed a more kid-friendly backpack to hold the pump and all its parts.
So it doesn't sort of identify the kid necessarily as different from all of their peers. And now we have children who go to school, who go to parks, who go to playgrounds wearing their backpacks, and the feedback's been pretty great.
Right now the backpacks are used for blinatumomab, but there are many conditions which require constant infusion of medication, and so the hope is these backpacks will be helpful in those illnesses as well. Pauline Chan, CTV News.
Still ahead, how customized cars drove one man to a life-changing journey. A well-designed car cruising down the street can turn heads, but for one Vancouver resident, it's even more special. His uniquely decorated vehicles empowered him to turn his life around and inspire others. CTV's Adam Sawatsky brings us his story.
While this one lock is likely inconsequential,
seriously, would anybody steal this car?
All the other items attached to Dennis Brandt's daily driver are proving to be more meaningful.
Duck was early on.
And the swan swimming along the ski in front of it came later, while these fish on the back and that faucet fastened on the front are more recent.
I bought that to use as plumbing, but didn't work out, so now it's on the car.
Decades before he started decorating his latest car in Canada, Dennis began driving his first car after growing up in Oklahoma.
That was a 1980 Chevy Chevette. Very, very mundane.
But it inspired the sort of smiles that were few and far between when Dennis was younger.
I had stomach aches for 4 years.
Because he felt so different and the other kids were so unkind.
It was really difficult.
Until a couple years after this one, when Dennis bought an old police cruiser at auction.
It was a reliable car and everything, but it was the most homely car.
So Dennis decided to do something about it with decorations, which proved to be so empowering, he moved on to painting an old school bus and bedazzling an old bread truck.
Lots of shiny bits. I like the bling.
But he loves how driving a creative car allows him to connect with others.
If I'm pumping gas, the person that I'm next to is probably going to talk to me, and if they don't, it's probably not somebody I want to get to know anyway.
And now, Dennis is fueled by delight.
Everything on that car really is just stuff that appeals to me.
And everything in the car, from the dashboard filled with toy ducks to the ceiling set for tea time, is featured for fun.
Getting to where I am now has not been a cakewalk. Now it's a celebration, really.
And now that once shy boy is sitting confidently in this dynamic driver's seat, he hopes his artistic automobile will inspire others to take the wheel in their own lives.
Don't let anything stop you from becoming the person that you were meant to be.
Adam Sawatsky, CTV News, Vancouver.
That's the CTV National News for this Saturday. For all of us, thanks for watching. Have a good night.